Welcome. We will get started. My name is Kelly Webb, and I am the Director of Literacy for Fulton County Schools. And today we have the opportunity to review our 3 vendors for our textbook adoption for K through 2. Here are our 3 textbook adoption goals as a Fulton County School District. The first is to provide a comprehensive resource that addresses all aspects of literacy, reading foundational, reading informational, reading literary, writing, speaking listening, and language. The second goal is to ensure that we provide instruction on the foundational literacy skills that is explicit and systematic. And finally, to provide multiple opportunities for students with practice and application aligned to the 5 pillars of reading: phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. So those are the goals as we try to adopt a new district textbook. The goal is to have one textbook for all schools. So those of you who have used to in the past, our last textbook adoption, schools either selected Journeys or they selected Good Habits, Great Readers. And schools had a choice in which one of those that they selected as their textbook. This year, we will only be bringing one textbook forward to the board so that all schools will utilize the same resource. Here's a breakdown of our schedule for today. So this first part is just an introduction around the textbook adoption process, where we were and where we are right now, and the plan for the future in terms of the timeline. And then from 9 to 9:30, our first vendor, Wonders, will present. So they will do a 20-minute presentation, and then they will do about 5 to 10 minutes of just exploration around their demo site. And then from 9:45 to 10:15, we'll be into reading. Then again, we have another 15-minute break. And then from 10:30 to 11 o'clock, Benchmark Workshop will be presenting. So we'll have 3 presentations with a 15-minute break in between each presentation. And we will not have time for questions for the vendors, but if you have questions, you can populate them into the Q&A, and we will either answer those at the end or send out some answers to those questions later. So here's the timeline of the process. So we actually began the process back in October. We had our vendor fair on November 4th and 5th, where 3 staff members from every elementary school could send, 3 staff members could attend. K through 2, it could be teachers, principals, CSTs, literacy coaches. So 3 per school, and we had about 150 staff members attend that vendor fair. And we had 5 vendors present their materials. There was time for presentations as well as exploration of the site, and then they filled out a rubric according to our district rubric, which we'll go over that rubric. And then we presented based on that. We found what the top 3 vendors were, which are the 3 vendors that you see today. And that was shared with the board on November 6th. And so the public review process began November 30th and goes through January 22nd. And then at that time, we will review all of the feedback. And on February 5th, we will share with the board the feedback and the one textbook that we're proposing to be approved by the vendor, and by the board. And then the goal is for the board to adopt that on March 18th, and then we would begin the textbook ordering process March to April, and then we will begin professional development beginning in May of this year and throughout next year. So that's just a little bit about the timeline for the textbook adoption process. So here is just the first step that we did was take a look at what the current textbooks were in other districts around the metro area. And so you can see a list of those resources and the different publishers that have been adopted by our neighboring districts. Take a minute for you to just review that. So based off of those resources that our neighboring districts had adopted, we then looked at Ed Reports and Louisiana Believes, which are two organizations who utilize the science of reading to determine the textbooks that align to the science of reading and our textbook adoption goals. These are the different domains of the rubrics that how they evaluate the textbooks. So Ed Reports evaluates textbooks based on text quality, building knowledge, usability, and standards alignment. And then you can see Louisiana Believes, very similar, just kind of more in that area. So for example, in text quality, they also include the range and volume of text and text dependent questions. And then things like standards alignment, they break that down into foundational skills, as well as writing to sources, speaking and listening, and language. And then they also included assessment, scaffolding, and support. So we use the information in these particular rubrics and our neighboring districts to then identify programs and textbooks that were aligned to the 5 pillars of reading. In our literacy framework, we have, you hopefully have seen this visual before, but our reading foundational skills in our ELA Georgia Standards of Excellence, so those are our F standards, those are phonological awareness, phonics, and fluency, and then vocabulary and comprehension are embedded in either some of our language standards as well as some of our reading literary and reading informational standards. And so that foundation of those 5 pillars of reading are needed in order for students to be able to analyze text and do a lot of the work around the reading literary and informational standards. And as students progress into 3rd grade and beyond, as they take the Georgia milestones, they have to be able to analyze text and author's craft and structure. As K2 teachers, you guys know the importance of that foundation though, so that students can be able to read on grade level text so that they can get to that text analysis piece. So in order to do that, we need to have a comprehensive program that provides explicit and systematic instruction aligned to these 5 pillars of reading. We just want to make sure that we all have the same language regarding these terms, explicit and systematic. And these also can be found in our literacy framework. So explicit means that the concepts are clearly explained to students, that the skills are clearly modeled and students are given precise directions. And then systematic means that there is a carefully selected set of letter-sound relationships that are organized into a logical sequence. So this is our scope and sequence in terms of phonics. In Fulton County Schools, we have developed a phonics scope and sequence in the absence of a textbook that has a systematic and explicit phonics portion of the program. So therefore, we've created a district Fulton County scope and sequence that can be found in our ELA curriculum maps. That scope and sequence will be adjusted based on our textbook. However, the thing that we're really looking for with that systematic is that students are presented with letters and sounds in a very systematic way. And so, for example, in kindergarten, students should be taught around 4 to 5 consonants with a vowel so that they can blend and build CVC words before moving to another vowel, instead of, for example, introducing 2 vowels at the same time. So that's what we mean by explicit and systematic, and this is particularly important in the areas of phonological awareness and phonics. So as you're reviewing today's materials, you'll want to ensure that these materials include explicit and systematic instruction throughout the program. So in Fulton County, for our teacher review vendor fair that we had in November, we developed a rubric based on those rubrics that we shared with you earlier, and we developed our own Fulton County rubric with these 4 main categories: instructional design, content and pedagogy, text quality, and assessment. And you can see underneath each of those categories some of the indicators. So for example, in instructional design, we wanted to ensure that the organization of those materials were very user-friendly for both you as teachers as well as our students. And then also ensuring that that instructional design included opportunities for differentiated and scaffolded instruction. And then content and pedagogy, that's where we want to see that explicit and systematic instruction around the reading foundational skills. But we also want to ensure that these materials are aligned to our reading, literary, and informational standards, as well as writing, language, speaking, and listening. And then in text quality, you can see those different categories, really ensuring that we have a range and volume of text. As K2 teachers, you know the importance of having numerous text available. We want to ensure that we have text for read aloud, have text for modeled reading, that we have mentor text for writing, that we have decodable text, that we have level text for guided reading, reading workshop, strategy groups, etc. And then we want to have assessment where there's varied modes of assessment, and it's assessing all of the different domains that you see in that content and pedagogy box. So those were the 4 categories of our rubric, and teachers who participated in the vendor fair used a rubric aligned to these 4 categories to determine the 5 vendors that we reviewed to then narrow that down to 3 vendors. As part of the public review process, because that public review includes both parents, well, not both, but parents, community members, and teachers and staff, the rubric is much shorter. And so the rubric has these same categories, but not as many indicators in that. And that can be found on our Fulton County website. So on November 4th and 5th, here were the 5 textbooks that we reviewed. So Benchmark Workshop, EL, Open Up Resources, Into Reading by HMH, My View by Savis, which is formerly known as Pearson, and then Wonders by McGraw-Hill. So after those 5 presentations, teachers submitted the rubric for each of those 5 vendors, and based on the data, the following resources were recommended for public review: Benchmark Workshop, Into Reading, and Wonders. So those are the 3 that are available for review. They are available for review, as you can see here, at the Administrative Center, the North Learning Center, and the South Learning Center as well. So if you, community members that you know, other teachers at your building want to actually see hard copies of that, those are available at the Administrative Center, the North Learning Center, and the South Learning Center, and they will be on display until January 22nd. And then there is also an opportunity for everyone to review the materials online. You can see that website. If you go to fultonschools.org and you just scroll down to the middle, there is a banner that talks about the textbook adoption process. And if you click there, more information can be found. So we have our event today from 8:15 to 11, and then any teachers and staff who are not able to join us this morning, there's another opportunity today from 12:15 to 3 o'clock. And then we also have opportunities for both parents and community members, both on Thursday evening from 5 to 6:45, and then Saturday from 9:30 to 10:45 a.m. So if you have any parents and community members who are interested in reviewing those materials, please be sure to share that with your families. And principals and assistant principals receive this information prior to the break, so they should have it as well if you have any questions. So one thing as you are reviewing the materials is to think about all of the different standards and domains that we talked about earlier. So you can see those listed below. And in our literacy framework, this is our current recommended guidance on the number of minutes for both reading and writing. And so you can see we have a significant amount of time dedicated to literacy instruction in Fulton County Schools for our K through 2 students. There might be some slight changes around the number of minutes, but basically the same number of minutes would be recommended. So you want to be looking for materials that you can utilize during modeled reading, where you're introducing students to that above grade level complex text. Also opportunities for shared reading, opportunities for guided reading or reading workshop, conferences, small group instruction, and of course phonics and word study, and then as well as materials that offer opportunities for writing workshop for our students. So the research suggests that in order to effectively provide literacy instruction, we need to have one comprehensive resource, and that will help streamline both instruction, assessment, as well as our professional development. So we hope that this comprehensive resource will lessen the need for supplemental ELA resources so that you as a teacher aren't having to pull from multiple different resources, but can go to one resource for your literacy instruction. And we will be providing ample professional development opportunities around the resource once it is identified, and we are working to develop a plan to slowly provide professional development in each of these areas. For literacy, because there are so many components, we will really focus strongly on phonics and foundational literacy in terms of learning the new textbook, and then gradually learn more about the other components of the literacy resource that we've selected, and that professional development we hope to begin providing in May. So that is the end of our slideshow, and I'm going to ask Hoke to bring us back out to the main screen. Just a moment.
I'm all ready.
Okay. So at this time, I am going to allow anyone to type any questions that they have in the chat box around the process, and we'll answer as many questions as we can. Prior to that, the vendors will start promptly at 9 o'clock. But I'm going to hang here for just a minute to see if there are any questions. And Hoke, am I able to see those questions, or just you, because it says?
Yeah, if you look in the far right-hand corner, there is what looks like a heartbeat, and then next to that is a question mark. And if you click that, you can see the questions that they're asking.
Okay, so I just see what time does the meeting start? Is that the only one that you see? Just making sure.
Yeah.
Yep, I
yeah.
see some. Okay, I see some other questions populating. Okay, so the 9 o'clock will be our first vendor. So 9 to 9:30, then there's a 15-minute break. Then 9:45 to 10:15 will be the second vendor, and then from 10:30 to 11 o'clock will be the third vendor. Another question that has appeared is who will make the final decision. So we will, once we gather the public review data, the ELA department and the learning and teaching department will review the feedback from the public review as well as our initial teacher vendor fair to make a decision and ensure that they meet the threshold of the rubric. And then based on the feedback from the public review, which includes teachers and staff, so ensuring that you get the opportunity to share your review in addition to our parents and community members, it's important that you as teachers provide input as well. And so that will then collect that data, we'll share that with the board in February to then recommend one resource. A question asks, where does the Lucy Calkins units of study fit into this? So the units of study is currently a supplemental resource rather than a district textbook adopted resource. The goal is to move towards one comprehensive resource. So we are working on a plan to where we would no longer utilize those materials in terms of literacy instruction. Does not mean that we do not want to utilize those methodologies in our thinking, because I know many schools have spent a lot of time on professional development around the resource, and there are lots of valuable things in that resource, but the research suggests in order to provide comprehensive literacy instruction, one resource is needed. So another question is, does the county intend to purchase all components of whichever program is purchased? Yes, we intend to purchase all components. So whatever all the leveled readers are that are included, and there will be both digital access as well as print access, which I know has been a struggle, especially during starting in March, with the need for virtual learning as well as simultaneous instruction. I know that's been a heavy burden on our teachers of not having access to ample text. I will say that all three of our vendors have lots of digital text available for students and teachers in the areas of read aloud, decodable readers, level text, etc. But yes, we do intend to purchase all components of the program. Are we adopting a new system for evaluating readers, or will we continue to use BAS? We don't have that decision finalized right now, but I would guess, my best guess right now, is that we will continue to use the benchmark assessment system because that is a diagnostic assessment to identify students, not only instructional reading level, but their reading behaviors, reading process, and so forth. So the assessment pieces that are embedded in the program are more what we would use for our formative and summative assessment. So for example, if we're teaching, short A words right now, we would then utilize the phonics assessments within the textbook and utilize that for standards mastery, assessing standards, but we would still most likely use the BAS as well. But each year, our district-wide assessment strategy and assessments that are identified is reviewed each year. So I don't know the answer to that right now. Will the slide deck be available? Yes, Ms. Freeman, we will make sure that the slide deck is available. Okay, so a question is, what resources will go away as the result of adopting a new textbook? So all student materials that were part of the original textbooks, as well as any other resources that you have, like student readers and manipulatives, letter tiles, all of that are able to stay in schools, but any teacher adopted textbooks, as well as the units of study, there will be a process for discarding those materials. In terms of, for example, schools that are using Orton Gillingham, in my opinion, you guys will still be able to use those Orton Gillingham practices and philosophies that but you would want to, you would be required to utilize the program that we adopt in terms of the scope and sequence, right? So you can still use the strategies learned from OG and other things like that, but you would need to follow the scope and sequence of our textbook. I am just kind of looking at some different things. One question is, will this replace On Our Way to English for ESOL teachers? No. Our ESOL resources will still be utilized in the ESOL classroom by ESOL teachers. That will not change. In terms of the units of study, the teacher kits will be discarded, but any student resources and the mentor text, the read aloud, etc., those will not be discarded. One question is, finance a concern for the board in purchasing one of the programs? Prior to the adoption textbook process, we asked the board to commit funds for that purchase, and so that commitment was already made. So I do not think there is a concern in terms of finance for purchasing the programs. One question was, why did we not review Fontes and Pinnell curriculum? So we did review Fontes and Pinnell curriculum as part of the initial process before we identified the 5 vendors. But according to both Ed Reports and Louisiana Believes, the Fontes and Pinnell curriculum is not aligned to the science of reading. So therefore, we are not reviewing that for a comprehensive resource for Fulton County schools. So far, I think I've answered all the questions. If you have other questions, keep those coming. Okay, Hoke and I will be here until the presentation from our first vendor, Wonders, begins at 9 o'clock. But we officially have a break right now. But if you have any questions, you can type them into the Q&A and we will answer those. But right now we will have a break. So Hoke, is there a way that I can, on the slide deck, can we move to the second slide that has the schedule? Do I need to do that on my computer?
I just realized you couldn't hear me. Yes, do that on your computer, Kelly.
Okay, so it's actually slide 3. I think I have it
Yep.
up
And
now.
then just
Okay.
click the presentation down the lower right-hand corner.
Okay. If I do that, though, I won't be able to see the Q&A.
No. But you know what, Kelly? I'm watching it. If anything comes in, I'll text you.
Okay, so I see another question. When will the program go into use? So the goal is to have the board approve the textbook in March, and then we would begin the textbook ordering process in March, so that we would be able to begin implementing the program in fall of 2021. Again, this will be for K2. Our goal is to select a textbook for 3 through 12 next year. So the goal is for the program to begin implementation in fall of 2021. Another question is the textbook something that covers reading and writing? So yes, the textbook that we are looking for would need to be aligned to the 5 pillars of reading, that those foundational literacy skills, as well as reading informational, reading literary, writing, speaking and listening, and language. So we want a comprehensive textbook that addresses all of those ELA domains. Does the purchase include professional development? Yes, the purchase will include professional development, but our Fulton County ELA department will work very closely with that team, and I'm certain that our own Fulton County staff will be also providing professional development to CSTs, literacy coaches, instructional leaders, as well as teachers, so that we're providing professional development that is aligned to our Fulton County Standards Mastery Framework, as well as our other Fulton County resources. You guys are asking some great questions, so keep them coming. Another question that has been asked is, does the program include phonics as well? Yes, all 3 of our vendors that we are reviewing includes phonics, and yes, as a result, the units of study phonics will not be utilized as a resource for any school selected purchases of phonics resources. We will be utilizing the district adopted textbook as a replacement for any other supplemental phonics resources that schools have used in the past. Do any of the textbooks have an abundance of resources that can be utilized by students remotely? So yes, all 3 vendors have a student platform where students can go on and access resources, as well as where teachers can assign different tasks for students. So yes, all 3 vendors have ample resources that can be utilized for students who are remote, simultaneous, etc. That was definitely a priority as we were reviewing the resources as well. Another question, technology pieces. So yes, there's technology as well as there's technology pieces available as well for teachers in terms of assessment and data, in terms of students, if we utilize some of those resources. What will PD for 3 through 5 look like next year while we're in between adopting a new textbook series? Jen, I don't know the answer to that fully yet. I think part of that will be dependent on A, which textbook we get for K2, B, which textbooks we're reviewing for 3-5. But you know, we will continue to utilize our SMF framework in terms of literacy instruction. And so all of the work that we've been doing on reading informational and literary standards for modeled reading instruction, mini lessons, all of that would be important, but I don't have a complete answer for that for 3-5 yet. With CSTs and coaches, we will also be providing, starting this month, instruction on the instructional growth rubrics aligned to literacy, so it might be focused around that as well. Another question about K2 units of study, just to confirm, yes, K2 units of study of phonics will no longer be utilized as a resource. Okay, one said, can you clarify the scope and sequence? Does the textbook write it, or is it provided by the county? So in terms of the phonics scope and sequence, we will utilize the phonics scope and sequence that is embedded in the textbook. So for example, in kindergarten, the first set of letters and sounds that we teach on our Fulton County Phonics scope and sequence is like MSTA, for example, something around those lines. However, if the new program does, you know, LOGHTP, then we will go in that order. So we will utilize the scope and sequence for the phonics within that. In terms of right now, we have six-week units for our curriculum, and we have a certain set of reading, literary, and informational standards in each of those units. So we will look at the textbook to then determine if we need to keep 6-week units or if we need to change that, and which reading, literary, and informational standards and learning targets would be covered in each of those units. So we will use the textbook as a guide when we're creating the curriculum maps in terms of reading, literary, informational, and writing standards in conjunction with our SMF to determine that curriculum map and scope and sequence. But the phonics scope and sequence will be based on what is provided by the textbook. Yes, special ed will continue to still utilize the new Linda Mood Bell program with special education students because that's specially designed instruction that should be on top of the Tier 1 instruction for students. Another question is, will first graders for remote learning have access to a laptop? That's not currently in the plan. That's not something determined necessarily by the Learning and Teaching Department or the ELA department. I do not know what the school district is considering for next year in terms of student access for grades K through 1. That would be a question better to ask your principal to find out from either our chief academic officer or from our informational technology department. That's not, to my knowledge, in the plans, but if so, that would be something outside of our ELA textbook adoption process. Another question is, are they looking to do a similar textbook curriculum transition in math? So next year, the goal is to do a textbook adoption for 3 through 12 ELA. So that means that math would not, at the soonest, would be fall of 2022 that they would begin reviewing the materials to then adopt in fall of 2023. So there's nothing soon happening in terms of math. How in terms of a new textbook, However, in terms of the standards, as you guys are probably aware, the standards is currently doing a review and are proposing a draft of review standards. So in terms of that, I'm not sure. I would encourage you to reach out to either Susan Baker, or you could reach out to Angela Ergel or Amy Kilbride. Those are the K through 5 math program specialists if you have any questions regarding that. But I believe it would be around fall 2023 before a new textbook would be adopted for math. When will teachers be trained on the new program over the summer or throughout the 21-22 school year? Our goal is to begin training as soon as May and continue it throughout the whole school year. Because literacy has so many different components and the resource is going to have information aligned to all of those different components, we really feel it's important that teachers have ongoing professional learning opportunities to really unpack each of those different parts of the resource, and in order to ensure instruction is explicit and systematic. So our goal is to begin some training for our instructional leaders and teachers as soon as May and continuing throughout the entirety of the school year. We do not know yet what that looks like, and that plan would need to be approved by others. How will this impact IB schools as we currently rearrange pacing based on our units? I do not know the answer to that. I will speak with Amy Barger around that, as well as April Hardy, to figure out what it, in terms of what's a hold tight in terms of the pacing for that. Because I do know in terms of IB, your units are different. So that is a question that I am writing down and that we will get back to you guys around for those of our schools. And I think we have about 4 IB elementary schools. So we will get back to you guys about IB.